Hello, and thank you for joining us once again on our exciting series on the story of the Bible. In this session, we will continue where we left off in the last session. In the previous session, we asked the question, why was man so important to God and to his creation project? And we discovered that man was created to represent God on earth. Man was God's likeness and image. He was to extend God's temple, the sacredness of his presence and creation beauty from Eden throughout the entire earth. But this never happened. So in this session, we're going to ask the question, why not? And what went wrong? Why instead do we read with horror of man's relationship with God being severed, of the earth becoming cursed, of man being sentenced to death and his life on death row while being one of hard labor, toil and sweat, of family relationships becoming heartbreaking, of conflict and violence among people and nations, of famine and disease prowling the earth, and all because it seems Adam and Eve transgressed by eating a piece of fruit God told them not to eat. I mean, it does seem that God was a little bit too sensitive on a particular occasion, does it not? In fact, a casual read of Genesis chapters 1 to 3 by any novice Bible student might possibly question the wisdom as to why God placed the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden in the first place. After all, if it wasn't for that tree, with all its tantalizing fruit, all this terrible fallout wouldn't have occurred, right? Well, let's discuss this, and in the light of what we've already observed from previous sessions. We have learned thus far that Adam, or man, was created in God's likeness and image to be adopted into the royal family of God, as an heir of God and of his kingdom. He was to rule together with God in bringing God's creation project to fullness, completion, and glory. So, why don't we see God and man working together as God had purposed from before the world began in fulfilling God's creation project? Well, here's where it really gets interesting. You see, rulership with God in God's kingdom and as part of the royal family of God demanded man to possess and display characteristics and qualities that the Godhead of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit possessed and displayed. John 17:21. Adam and Eve had to demonstrate these very same qualities in order to qualify for such a sacred co-rulership with God. This is where the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and its delectable fruit comes in. There was nothing wrong with that tree nor its fruit. God created it and placed it there, not the devil. God does not create evil, nor does he make mistakes. In fact, this tree, along with every other tree and its fruit, was created for blessing. And it could be argued that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, with its fruit, was the tree with the greatest potential for blessing, more than any other. Why? Because this tree and its fruit was placed there to provide man with the opportunity to qualify for rulership with God in his kingdom and for all eternity. All that Adam and Eve had to do was follow the specific instructions from God regarding this particular tree and its fruit. So, what was this tree and God's instructions about this tree all about? Well, Adam was created as a free moral agent with the ability to make free moral choices. This tree and its fruit was all about Adam making moral choices in favor of God, thus taking on the divine nature of God, and man demonstrating suitability for divine rulership in God's kingdom and participation in God's royal family. You see, Adam was created perfect but not complete. At creation, Adam was not yet the done deal. He was not yet the finished product. God could have created Adam with robotic obedience, similar to the powerful instincts that birds and animals possessed, but robotic obedience was so far removed from God's nature and the way the Godhead and the royal family functioned. Remember, Adam was made in God's likeness and image, not the image and likeness of birds and animals. So, as such, God could create Adam perfect, and he did, but not complete. Completion was always going to be a journey, and a journey of Adam and Eve making choices in favor of God. And this is what the tree of the knowledge of good and evil provided. This was God providing Adam and Eve with the opportunity to qualify for royal duties, so to speak. Wow, what a blessing. What a blessing the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was. Now, how long this journey was to take, we don't know. How long it would take for this divine nature to be formed within man, we don't know. But what we do know is that Adam and Eve sadly never got past base one, so to speak. Adam and Eve, the representatives of all of humanity, chose disobedience towards God over obedience and allegiance to God, thus forfeiting man's adoption to sonship and inheritance as heirs in God's kingdom and participation with God in bringing his creation project to glorious fullness. Interestingly, Professor N.T. Wright, commenting on this, says, actually, idolatry was at the very heart of Adam and Eve's fall and the essence of the devil's temptation. Disobedience, the eating of the fruit, was the result of idolatry. In Philippians chapter 2, Paul, in speaking about Jesus, said that Jesus did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. Verse 6. But this is exactly what Adam and Eve did. Instead of humble submission to God, they elevated themselves to be as God or in place of God. And Paul also brings this out in Romans when speaking in chapter 1 that talks about the fall and disintegration of mankind, where man went from knowing God, verse 19, to not honoring him as God, verse 21, which is idolatry, and then descending into spiritual and moral disintegration, verses 24 to the end of the chapter. So, what does humble submission and obedience to God look like? Well, it can very easily be summed up in the greatest of all commandments, which is loving God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind, and with all our strength. Mark 12:30. The good news is, the gospel is that God did not give up on his creation project, as catastrophic as this now appears to be. But what we have discovered in this session is that there was another project which was at the very heart of God's creation project, and that we could refer to as God's human project, or his adoption project, his project of qualifying man to be adopted into the royal family of God, to be heirs in kingdom endeavors, and join with God in our working of the glorification of his creation project and for all eternity. This is the greater mission of God. God's mission is his creation project, and at the heart of his creation project is his human project, man becoming a partaker of his divine nature. Interestingly, Paul in Romans chapter 8, the new creation chapter of the book of Romans, has God's wider creation project being fulfilled immediately upon the fulfillment of his human project. So the two are inseparable, as one will not be fulfilled without the other. But the most important is God's human project. So the plot deepens, does it not? This really is turning into a most fascinating story. See you next time. God bless.